After the second season of the anime finished airing, I was hearing a lot about how good, how entertaining the manga was, especially the most recent chapters. From many a different source as well, from social media, from friends, so I'd been given a pretty good impression of the story's quality after the anime, and I made the choice to read it, to catch up, and it didn't disappoint in terms of, well, just pure hype. Reading Gojo vs Sukuna is right up there, and I only hope I could have read it weekly with the rest of the fanbase. As a whole, the manga's been a major net positive. It's been so good. Not perfect, but the good far outweighs the bad from my point of view. But as of recently, the Jujutsu Kaisen community has been getting more and more riled up with each passing chapter due to the circumstances of the current situation. And this, maybe not just by coincidence, comes right after the biggest event in the whole story, which is Gojo's death. So that's the plan, to go over the events that succeeded, which can be summed up with the term Sukuna's Gauntlet. First, I've kind of already talked about this up to chapter 248, which is the chapter of the manga I caught up with, so a bit of this video will be like an updated version of my opinions from the second half of my Shinjuku Showdown video that I made around 4 months ago or so. And also, technically, I guess Gojo's fight with Sukuna would count as the opening matchup of the Gauntlet, but I'm not going to talk about it here because I think that it's its own thing, that fight is an entity separate from the rest of the other fights. But that doesn't mean that we can move on to the next matchup just yet, because before we get to that, we need to lay the foundations with which the rest of the manga after Gojo's defeat are based on. Those foundations being the JJK fandom's mourning, well, not really mourning, coping at the loss of Gojo Satoru. I am an outsider looking in here since this was a good few months before I picked up the manga, but from what I did see, thanks to my own curiosity, things were rough. But I don't think anyone could deny, or at least anyone who was thinking logically and not being clouded by their own biases, could deny that Sukuna winning the fight was really the only plausible outcome. Yeah, we make jokes of how Gojo is essentially the main character, or was the main character, but there wasn't ever really a way, from a storytelling point of view, not a power scaling point of view, that Gojo should have won the fight. It showcases the beginning of the end, kind of. Sukuna won the battle, but he isn't gonna win the war. Although the thing is that he's also won every other battle since then, and he doesn't seem like he's gonna slow down, which kind of changes how we view the previous fights. I guess he's called the strongest sorcerer in history for a very good reason, but how does that translate in its portrayal in the manga? Regarding what we have seen after Gojo vs Sukuna so far, I split it up into two parts where I see the outcomes of the situations in one half differently to the other half. It will make more sense when we reach that point where the second part begins, where I have that split. First up is Kashimo, whose entire purpose was being able to fight Sukuna. This went just about as I expected it to go, Kashimo standing absolutely no chance. Sukuna pulled out his true form with his forearms, which gives him an even greater advantage over everyone else remaining. As soon as Sukuna does transform, Kashimo might as well have already been saying his prayers, because he got his dream of fighting Sukuna, but while he's fawning over the King of Curses, that dream was coming to an end real soon. And there's this sort of afterlife sequence with Kashimo talking to Sukuna and Sukuna acknowledging him, more so over their shared circumstance of being strong, being above others. It's only a short conversation, but it says a lot, I think, about Sukuna, how he is choosing to talk about fulfillment and love here, while saying that he doesn't care about those things. He enjoys being lonely at the top is the best way I think you could put it. And we get a bit more of this sentiment after the next round where Yuji and Higuruma jump in. Higuruma, who was my favourite new addition to the cast from the Culling Game arc. Just like the Kashimo fight, I don't think it went in any unexpected direction. That's not an issue though. Of course, this is where Higuruma dies, and this brings up one of the issues that some have, not just with this arc but with the wider story, which is character deaths before we supposedly get enough development from said character. I do agree that there are a few cases of this, characters that fall victim to it, but Higuruma doesn't land in that category for me, and ironically it's because we are told what he could have become. I don't remember the line specifically, but it's to do with him having greater potential than even Gojo, and it's that thing specifically I think that elevates his character, the fight as a whole, as well as Sukuna's character. Higuruma was just never the type to be the hero, the be-all end-all protector of justice, fitting given his law background. So him having this ridiculously high ceiling but not reaching it works really well, and then you have his story very closely linked to Yuji's, who's got his own potential which he will, or at least I think he'll reach. And you've got a great duo which then has its own benefits when you put them in front of Ryoma and Sukuna, fresh off of that conversation with Kashimo about not needing others to fulfill his desires. Higuruma's death is the start of Sukuna's facade cracking, I think. He was disappointed with Higuruma's death, which I interpret as meaning he saw Higuruma's potential and was angry that he couldn't fight him at that hypothetical level. It's that idea of Sukuna says he only fights for his own enjoyment as a pastime, but in reality he can only enjoy himself if he's got a worthy dancing partner, and Higuruma fell short of those expectations, leaving Sukuna feeling blue balls, for a lack of a better term. And now this is the part I was talking about, that point where I split up the Sukuna Gauntlet, because this is the point where Yuta now jumps in. I view to split it here because the first two fights with Kashimo and Higuruma, they were side characters, and ultimately as much as they added to Sukuna and the story, they were not going to be the ones to beat him. And with Yuta jumping in, it marks the main cast arriving now to take their shot. Yuji is there. Here's a better way to put it. The Kashimo and Higuruma fights were the preliminaries, and Yuta has kicked off the main card. For me, Yuta's arrival signified a major turning of the tides. Yuta and Yuji. Things started off so well. Yuta was making me a believer, pulling out all the tricks. Cleave, Jacob's ladder, the plan's execution is going perfectly, and the manga says that they are slowly weakening him, they're weakening Sukuna. This is how it should be, slowly but surely eroding the mountain, only for Megumi to have already fallen too far into the abyss and not having the will to fight, and Sukuna initiates the world slash. Yuta is, well, I was going to say that he's the strongest living sorcerer on our side right now, but is he even alive? The last we saw of him, Wiwi was transporting his body off of the battlefield. If he was to die or is confirmed dead, how would the fanbase react to it? And this is where I think things get a bit shaky for the story and the fanbase. I said Yuta was the strongest on our side and he's already out of commission. The number of people that can actually do something are slowly dropping. And from this point, I'm going to skip over a lot of the details for the remaining chapters now, since it is mostly fighting and there's no point of me just narrating stuff you already know. But Maki jumps in and she is one of those few remaining people who can do something. But the biggest takeaway here is that in the final page of chapter 252, it's a very cool visual. But what do you mean Sukuna has yet to go all out? He's gone through Gojo, the strongest of today, Kashimo, the strongest of his era, Higuruma with greater potential than Gojo, Yuta a prodigy only behind Gojo in the modern era, and he's not going all out. Now, it makes sense that the strongest sorcerer in history is in fact the strongest sorcerer in history. But when he's fought, as the manga puts it, the peaks of sorcery, how is he not giving it his all? Especially when it was stated that he was being weakened by Yuta and Yuji, and then Maki is taken out, and who the heck is left? Kusakabe, the main commentator of the Gojo vs Sukuna fight, is now having to step it up. He's also done. I am exaggerating how fast he is dealing with these people for dramatic effect, but you're all aware of how things are going. Miguel and Laru, the most random of all participants, have shown up, with Yuji and Maki getting back into the thick of things. So the current situation has been likened to the Madara situation in Naruto, where the big bad is so ridiculously powerful that the author has seemingly written themselves into a corner. I can see the similarities, but I don't think this current situation is that bad yet. I mean, he is kind of spamming black flashes at this point, but the latest chapter ended with Yuji awakening, so I hope this is truly where the tides turn. I'm assuming this, at least I hope, is where we get the upper hand for a decent stretch at least, because from my point of view, the issue isn't the fact that Sukuna is winning. I think it makes sense that he is able to fight all of these people, but the issue arises when he is fine after all of this, where he's got an answer to anything that happens. This concept of the strongest running the gauntlet is a great concept. Another recent example would be Kaido on the rooftop. I'm not trying to say who's the better character, who's stronger, just how their respective fights have been portrayed. One of the main points from the rooftop battle was how Kaido was growing weaker the more he fought. Both of these two characters, Kaido and Sukuna, revolve around them being the strongest, and the reality that comes with that, what their view is from the top looking out, with both of their viewpoints leading back to their deaths. Kaido looking for a spectacular one and looking for that one guy who can give that to him, that joy and thrill, and then Sukuna looking for the fun of the fight up until he dies. With Sukuna, I don't know how long it's gonna be until we defeat him, but guess what? Just like how Luffy awakened and beat Kaido, maybe Yuji's awakening is the key to defeating Sukuna. I don't know, I'm just spitballing. And away from the fighting, we have a weakness kind of set up already. With regards to his mentality, I mentioned with the Kashimo conversation and Higuruma's death, I think that from where I'm standing, Sukuna's character has some potential away from the fighting, which actually excites me more. We've established how powerful he is on multiple occasions and just how he is pure evil, so seeing that facade crack and his own hubris being his downfall is just as interesting to me as him slowly being weakened by everyone he is fighting. So is there the possibility of the story stagnating or going off the tracks? Yes. However, I don't think we are there yet, which means there's just as much potential for the story to pull something crazy out of the bag.